Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. MashaAllah. It's good to see you. I hope that others will eventually join in, but we're going to strive to start on time. As the Prophet ﷺ says, why do you say you do a thing and you don't do it? So we want to say that we start on time, inshallah, and then we want to do that. So, alhamdulillah. Let me again welcome everyone to the Sunday morning Zoom class for the Islamic Society Leading American Muslims, an organization that was established to invite people to the true and peaceful message of Islam, whether they were born into a Muslim family or they were folks that made a hijrah to Islam sometimes after their birth. And so it's important because I believe that Friday, inshallah, might have been the last day of Muharram, which is the first month of the Islamic calendar. I wanted to verify this because I'm just going on my memory. And then that's right, Safar, the month of Safar came. And if you look at Safar and you think of the word Sa'id, that's a traveler in the calls of Islam. And so we know that it's in that month that the Prophet ﷺ made his ascendance, where he went into the heavens on a barak and led all of the prophets, may Allah be pleased with them, in prayer. So there's a very beautiful piece of information, a piece of knowledge about this beautiful month. So our mission is to be loving, to be radically welcoming. Every single person is welcome with no judgment, with no criticism, with no castigation, with no condemnation, and no indictment. The motto of the group perhaps should be, if you can't say something good, don't say anything at all. And that was from the authentic sunnah of Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. May Allah make us to be among the people who guard our tongues, who control our tongues, who only say that which will benefit our soul, not only in this life, but in the hereafter. For those of you who donate generously to our organization so that we can continue to do da'wah, that we can support the Interfaith Community Resource Network and the speeches that we make, I say thank you. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to multiply your rewards for supporting this organization. I will remind myself and you that we are preparing for a production of the Faith Club on September the 20th at 10 a.m. at the United Methodist Church in Claremont, Florida. Inshallah, we'll be at the Unitarian Universalist Church in New Smyrna Beach on the 24th of September, at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Ormond Beach on the 29th of October, and then back at the Unitarian Universalist Church in New Smyrna Beach, December the 24th, making a presentation on Miriam, the mother of I.S.L.A.M in Islam. So hopefully we will begin to look for volunteers to host the September potluck and start talking about that date. In terms of prayers, joys, and concerns in our family, we want to make dua for Angelica and Better. They had a beautiful little girl. I don't have the name of her yet, but we received beautiful pictures of her, and mashallah, may Allah comfort Angelica. She had a very, very long labor, one of the longest I've ever heard of. So may Allah strengthen and give her increased demand and expiation for her sins, for all of the struggling that she had coming into motherhood. Of course, again, I'm so touched to see that we have Bader and Angelica's baby. And then, of course, we have Aya, Claudette, and Gennard, mashallah, new parents. And then Camila actually was due yesterday, and we are waiting, inshallah, for the arrival of Dean. And so please be in prayer for Laith and Camila, that they will have an easy delivery, inshallah. And so we are excited, and I envision praying that one day we can teach these youngsters. They'll all be similar in age, but we can teach them from their first pieces of knowledge about thoughts and how they don't define them. And we could teach them about the purification of the heart. And we could teach them principles. And I do pray that Allah will make it possible for me and for us to instill in them the principles that we are learning. We are still celebrating the joy that Mika's brother and wife got their visas. Rosie's son, we want to continue to pray for him, Michael, who has testicular cancer, for James and Julie and Maysoon and folks that are trying to find new careers or new work. And Allah make it easy for them and guide them to that which is good for them in this life and in the hereafter. We also want to continue to pray for Rizwana's mother, who had a knee replacement surgery in New Jersey. And I don't know if Rizwana is back in Orlando, but I know that she was in New Jersey caring for her mother. Alhamdulillah. So without further ado, unless someone else sends me another announcement, joy or concern in the chat, I will begin the khutbah al-hajj and begin the lesson of today, inshallah. In alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. May yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa may yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Indeed, all the praise is due for Allah. We seek Allah's help and forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil in our souls and our bad deeds. Whom Allah guides will never be led astray, and whoever Allah leads astray, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is no God, no deity but Allah, the one, having no partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is Allah's final slave and messenger. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who have believed, fear Allah as Allah alone should be feared, and do not die except as Muslims in sweet surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحم إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. O people, be dutiful to your Lord, who created you from one soul and created from it its mate, and dispersed from both many men and women. And fear Allah, through whom you demand mutual rights and revere the wombs that bore you. Indeed, Allah is ever over you all keen and observer. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida yuslih lakum a'malakum wa yaghfir lakum dhunubakum wa may yuti Allaha wa rasuluhu faqad faza fawzan 'azima. O you who have believed, fear Allah and speak words of appropriate justice. Allah Azza wa Jal will then amend for you your deeds and forgive you your sins. And whoever obeys Allah and Allah's messenger has attained the most excellent attainment. And so last week, if you remember, we looked at and examined the passages from Imam Ghazali about the extremity of human weakness and the inadequacies in this world. And we extrapolated from that 9 points. So just a little less than 3-minute review where we will talk about those 9 points and how they actually transition us into where we are going today, inshallah. So of those points, we looked at the importance of actively seeking to nurture our soul, to nurture our spiritual side. And we looked at the grave mistake of negligence if we don't do so. The second piece was the importance of detachment from the distractions and attachments of the world, and how that is the key to bringing out our spiritual essence, to make the spiritual essence outshine the worldly attributes of ourselves. And we know that this is often obscured or hidden by the demands and the temptations of the material world. When people see us showing up in the world, they often don't see us showing up in the soul world, in the spiritual world. The third point was the importance of caring for the spirit, the soul, in a way that allows its inherent nobility and glory to become evident in the world. So we want to not hide that light in a bushel, but let it shine. By nurturing the soul, qualities such as joy, eternal life, power, knowledge, and divine beauty can be not only experienced, but demonstrated, experienced in a way of Gnosis, in an experiential knowing. The importance of preparation for the hereafter. True glory and nobility are to be achieved in the afterlife. How the spirit is cultivated in this life will impact its condition in the next. The fifth point was about the importance of critiquing worldly pursuits like knowledge, strength, power, ambition, and beauty, which all have their limitations and vulnerabilities, causing them not to provide ultimate fulfillment or protection from suffering. The sixth point was the importance of knowing that those who are valued for their worldly attributes often possess ignorance or vulnerabilities that negate their apparent discernible strength, that fitra, that God infusion that is inside of them. People will admire and stand in awe of people with PhDs, but they will not stand in awe of the people who have learned to control themselves, and that their hearts have been the king of their castle, and the hearts are commanding each limb to please Allah. So, for example, someone with knowledge might lack understanding of their own origins, according to what Allah has said about our origins, that they come from the heavens in Surah 7 of the Holy Quran, Surah Araf. And someone powerful might be helpless against seemingly trivial challenges of the nafs. Some man might be able to lift 250 pounds or press 250 pounds, but he can't resist a beautiful woman, or he can't resist a piece of chocolate cake or a piece of pizza. The seventh point was the importance of reflecting on the impermanence of worldly pursuits and worldly things that are prioritized today. And the example that I gave was that of the very valued food that people want and desire and search for, and spend hours growing just exactly what they want, spend hours harvesting it, spend hours preparing it, and it only ends up as poison. And it is released within the body in such a short period of time. The eighth point was that the alchemy of spiritual happiness is about transforming oneself from a base and insufficient state to a higher, more enlightened state. Allah made us the people of knowledge. He gave Adam the knowledge of things. The alchemy of spiritual growth turns a person from a beast-like nature to an angelic nature. And then finally, the final point was about how important it is to connect self-knowledge with the knowledge of Allah. And this is where we are transitioning today. We are going to be looking at some knowledge of Allah. It's vitally important. And it's interesting because when I was teaching this, before I had reached a point similar to this, and I began to teach, and I think we have 67 of the names and attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal recorded in our bank of classes, which you can always go and read or study or look at. And then, so recognizing one's deficiencies, one's weaknesses and helplessness is crucial to understanding the divine and achieving spiritual growth. So up to now, we have been focusing on the knowledge of self. And now we will shift our focus to knowing Allah. May Allah be glorified. We have examined the outer form and the inner spirit. We have talked about how we have to worship with form and ruh. The physical body is commanded to do certain things, but we need to do it being connected to the ruh. Otherwise, it becomes a religious ritual and it ceases to have the essence of the God infusion in it. We did a lecture on knowing the true nature of the heart according to the Quran and Sunnah. The heart as the monarch of the body, is the king of the body. The armies of the body, or the heart, that is, being the limbs and the actual whole body. And we looked at the muscles and the bones, every single thing that Allah has given to us to please and to be His vicegerent on earth, inshallah. We looked at the roots of good and evil in the human being, guarding one's activities. The origin of the human being is the essence of angels. The marvels of the worlds of the heart, the link of the heart to the kingdom of heaven. The human being is born with an innate nature, the nobility of the soul through power. And we looked at the two kinds of power that we have. We looked at the true nature of prophethood and taqwahood, the people that are sometimes referred to as saints. And we looked at the veiling of the way. The human being's happiness lies in the understanding, in the experiential knowledge of Allah Most High, and that is why we are transitioning to that today, inshallah. The marvels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's handiwork in the human body and the extremity of human weakness and inadequacies in this world. Imam Ghazali begins by saying that the gnosis of the self, the knowledge of the self, that experiential knowledge of the self, remember, to know thyself is to know Allah, is the key to the gnosis actually of understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the experiential understanding of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. And so he begins with this passage. Know that in the books of the previous prophets, this saying which was said to them is well known. Know thyself, and thou knowest thy Lord. So this experiential knowledge of the self recognizes destructive and constructive patterns, which is the key to having experiential knowledge, learning, and awareness of Allah. So, in a sense, when you think of psychology, the study of the soul, Islam is all about the study of the soul. We need to know the soul as Allah has described it, and we need to know what the soul has become and what the soul needs to go back to and how it does that. And this is really the key to having this gnosis, this marifat, this experiential knowledge, learning, and awareness of our Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, interestingly enough, know thyself is a philosophical maxim inscribed upon the temple of Apollo in the ancient Greek precinct of Delphi. Christians, Jews, and Islamic authors found various scriptural equivalents for the maxim, know thyself. And this allowed them to discuss the topic of self-knowledge without reference anymore to the pagan inscription. Christian theologians generally understood the maxim to enjoin knowledge of the soul's origin in Allah, the soul's origin in God infusion, and then secondly, knowledge of the sinfulness of human nature. Self-knowledge is the key to the knowledge of truth, of haqq. And throughout the ages, all the great enlightened beings taught this, know thyself. And we know that Socrates taught this, know thyself. In the book of Thomas, which I have actually a copy of in my library, which is part of the Gnostic Gospels, a book that was not included in the Catholic canonization of the Bible, said, examine yourself and understand who you are. Whoever does not know self does not know anything, but whoever knows self has acquired the knowledge of the universe. This is so powerful. And this is what I.S.L.A.M said in the book of Thomas. And then Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, said, knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. And we know that wisdom means applied knowledge. And so the self that's connected to God will be the self that is applying the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says this is true knowledge, to seek the self. To seek anything else is ignorance. And then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he who knows himself, she who knows herself, knows Allah. There was an Egyptian proverb that said the body is the temple of God within you. And therefore it is said, man, humanity, woman, know thyself. Jesus said again in that Gospel of Thomas, when you know yourself, then you will be known, and ye shall know that you are children of the living God. But if you do not know yourself, then you live in poverty. So here, Isa is telling us you are a poor person in poverty if you do not stop and learn about yourself. Upanishad said those who know and realize the self are liberated, are forever free, is the way he said it. And we know that freedom from the self is freedom from the ego self. But we want to have freedom to operate within the ramifications of the God infusion. All the scriptures tell us one thing: know thyself. If you have known yourself, you have known everything else. And this was from Swami Satchidananda. All these are evidence that the heart is like a mirror. Whoever looks into it according to the right understanding will see Allah Azza. But many people do not look at themselves, and they do not know Allah. Coming to know the self is obligatory, because it is the mirror of Gnosis, the mirror of Marifat, of spiritual knowledge, awareness, insight about Allah Azza and spiritual practice. Imam Ghazali goes on to say that this has two aspects. One is more obscure, and most intellects cannot comprehend it. It cannot be explained to ordinary folks, nor is telling it to them proper. It's like giving a baby steak. A baby is given breast milk first, and then maybe a little rice cereal later on. And then slowly things are introduced to its diet. But a person who is beginning the spiritual realm should not be given steak at the first meal they have. The first thing we teach them is Tawheed. And if they accept that, we teach them Salah, inshallah. The other, number two, however, can be understood by everyone. And it is this, that a person knows from their own essence the existence of the essence of nature, heart and soul, fitra of Allah Azza wa Jal, may he be praised and glorified. From their own attributes, they recognize the characteristics of Allah Most High. When you look at what Allah has done, you are able to make so many comparisons to the attribute of Allah Azza wa Jal. From their own control over the kingdom of their self. And this is why Gnosis is so important. For you to have a knowledge of God, you've got to have a knowledge of God in you, so to speak. So from their own control over the knowledge of their self, which is their body and limbs, they recognize Allah's control over all the world. Imagine that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is managing all of the celestial paradise, all of the things of the world, every single world. And how well can we look at that and say, well, how can I manage my heart? How can I manage my hands? How can I manage my eyes? How can I manage my ears? How can I manage my feet? The explanation of this is that they know themselves firstly by their own existence, and they know that before that, by some years, they were non-existent. The Holy Quran says that there was a time when we were not remembered, we were not even thought about, it says in one translation. Our names did not exist at one time. There was no trace of us except in the soul world, which is part of the unseen. And it's in Surah 76, verse 1. Was there a period of time when one was not even worthy of a mention? It's like we were nobody, and then God infused us and gave us all of this possibility to rise up above humanity, to rise up above the animals, and to be like the angels. That which a human being finds of their own creation is that they know that before their own existence, they were a droplet of sperm, a droplet of fetid, foul-smelling water in which there was no intellect, no power of hearing or sight, no head, hands, legs, tongue, or eyes. And there's this beautiful development application that teaches children about the development of a fetus. And it tells them that today the fetus is the size of an egg or a squash or whatever. And it begins to teach children what is there at that time. MashaAllah. But just imagine that for every one of us who's beginning to look at ourselves, we were so insignificant that at one time we had no muscles and fetus, no veins, no bones, no flesh, and no skin at one time. Instead, we were fluid, white, homogeneous. And all of these wonders were made manifest in the womb. Either they made themselves manifest themselves, or someone or something else made them manifest themselves. Since they know that even in the perfect maturity stage, they cannot create a single strand of hair, they realized that when they were but a droplet of sperm, they were more helpless and deficient. Think about how deficient we feel sometimes with all of these muscles and bones and sinews and ligaments and hearts and systems that we have, how much more helpless we were when we were just a droplet of sperm. Therefore, the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Most High becomes known to them from the coming into existence of their own essence. If a human being does not know the essence from when they began and the power behind that, the creative forces and power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will never know themselves because they have forgot the first chapter. They have never been taught the first chapter and they're not aware of the beginning. Therefore, how well will they do in the end? When they look at their own body externally and internally, as has been explained to some, they see the power of their own creator, and they know that it is a perfect power that may create anything it wishes, when it wishes, how it wishes, and as it wishes, and where it wishes. What power is more power than that power which creates such a perfect and beautiful human being? And I'm speaking to everyone who is on this line today. Full of marvels and wonders from such a mean, contemptuous droplet of fluid. When they look at the prodigies of their own attributes and the benefits of their external limbs and organs, each of which was created for a particular purpose by Almighty Allah Azza wa Jal, such as among the external organs, the hands, the feet, the eyes, the tongue, the teeth, and among the internal organs, the liver and the spleen and the gallbladder, etc. And we looked at each of these and some of the amazing pieces of knowledge about them, and even how they connect and how they are connected to spiritual parts of our being. They recognize the utter perfection of the knowledge of the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It encompasses every single thing, my beloved brothers and sisters. They know that nothing can be absent or hidden from such a knower. If all the intellects of all thinkers were put together and given long lives to apply themselves to bringing out another aspect of any of these organs in their creation better than it is, they would simply not be able to do so. If they wish, for example, to change the position of the teeth, wherein the front teeth are sharp to cut food and the others are broad to grind the teeth. Think about the tongue is below to serve as a kind of miller's scoop, throwing the food into the mill. And the power under the tongue is like a flowing spring that produces saliva at the appropriate moment to moisten the food and to begin to break it down so that the throat can swallow it and it won't be lodged there or we won't choke to death on it. All the brains of the world cannot make it more perfect or improve upon this procedure. And in the same way, my beloved brothers and sisters, the hand has 5 fingers, 4 of one kind, and the thumb, which is set a little apart from them, is shorter, can work with or go atop any one of them. The fingers have 3 joints, the thumb but 2. If someone wants to hold something, making a scoop or a ladle of the hand, round it into a fist and make it a weapon, or spread it and make it into a kind of seed or trade. It has many other uses, of course, as well. You follow the intellects of the world who want to consider a different manner for the placement of the fingers so that they would be in line, or 3 on one side and 2 on the other, or to make them 6 instead of 5 or 4, or make the 3 joints 2 or 4. Whatever they think and say will be deficient. And it will cause, as we already know in our lives, that when we have a stroke or when we have a limb that doesn't work, if you have a torn rotator cuff, you will never be able to stick your arm straight up like this. So every single thing must be according to the amazing design of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The most perfect is that which Allah Azza has created. From this, it is evident that the knowledge of the Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, encompasses this person, and Allah is aware of everything. Thus, there is wisdom in every single microscopic part of a human being. However much a person may increase their knowledge, their astonishment at the magnitude of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Most High's knowledge will increase accordingly. So to know yourself forces you to look at the one who created you, to know the one who placed that God infusion in you. When a person looks at their own needs for their limbs, then the need for food, clothing, and shelter, and the need of their food for rain, winds, clouds, cold, heat, and the tools which with prudence bring it forth, and the need of those tools for materials such as iron, wood, copper, bronze, etc., and the need of those materials for direction and the knowledge of how to make them. Then they look. All of this has been created and made in the most perfect manner, and from each one so many different kinds that would have been impossible to occur in the mind of any person if not they had been created in them. Nor would one have been able to ask for what they didn't know about. Unsought and unknown, one sees them fashioned with the grace and mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. From this, another of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes is made known. the lives of all the great predecessors, the saints who were guaranteed paradise, the great prophets of God, and the great messenger of Allah are to that end. And that is the attribute of kindness, mercy, and care for all created beings. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, Allah's messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said when Allah had finished his creation, he wrote over his throne, "My mercy precedes my anger." And we think about that the Prophet ﷺ told us as humans, don't you go near to anger. It is so destructive. Don't do anything that'll make you anger. And then Allah points out that his mercy preceded his anger. Are we more merciful? Or are we more angry? I see so many angry people in the world because their nafs are not getting what they think that they're supposed to be getting, and people are not giving them what they want. But in mercy, we should be looking at Allah and getting to know Allah so that we will not have anything to be angry about, because we will only be grateful to Allah if we know this, if we have an experiential knowledge of this, and this comes from Sahih al-Bukhari. The Prophet ﷺ said, "The compassion of God, may Allah be honored and glorified, for God's servants is greater than that of a mother for her nursing child." We know that in a sufficient emergency, it's hard to believe it, but a mother will forget her nursing child. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never forgets us. Never, ever, ever, ever forgets us. Therefore, one sees the existence and the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fitra of Allah, most high in the manifestation of one's own essence. How often do you see that in yourself? Or do you walk around saying, I am so bad, I'm a terrible Muslim, I'm not good, I am this and I am that? No, we should be saying, I am a noble person, I am the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I have been called to Islam, I am a Muslim, a mu'min, a mutaqi, I am a believer. One sees the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge and the prodigies of wisdom in one's own parts. These are the parts that we need to focus on. If we are focusing on the parts that are not in alignment or harmony with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it means that we will be focusing on the parts of the Quran and the Sunnah that will correct that part of ourselves. And in the gathering of that which is necessary and needful for one, or one's goodness and adornment, all of which one finds created with one sees the kindness and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I encourage you, my beloved brothers and sisters, I beg you, I beseech you, I implore you to love yourself, as the Prophet ﷺ has so beautifully said, that no one truly believes, no one has iman, no one has a strong believer until they love for others what they love for themselves. Love for yourselves, that you are merciful to yourselves in time of hardship, that you are kind to yourselves and gentle to yourselves when things aren't going according to your nafs, that you say, Allah, thank you for this test and let me pass it. Let me be joyful in that you are remembering me and giving me this test. In this way, knowledge of the self becomes the mirror and key to the spiritual knowledge of God, which again is where we are moving today, where we are moving into for the future couple of lectures if Allah gives us life and breath. This passage delves deeply into the concept of self-knowledge as a pathway to understanding and connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And interestingly enough, this very short passage, I also broke it into 9 points, but different to the previous class, of course. The first point in the breakdown is know thyself is a universal maxim. The passage begins by introducing the well-known saying, know thyself, which has been echoed across various cultures and religions, including Greek philosophy and major religious figures like I.S.L.A.M, Muhammad S.A.W, and others. This maxim is presented as a way to gain insight, mind sight, the mind sight of the heart, understanding not only into oneself, but also into the nature and the reality of the divine. And just think about the power of all of that we have examined inside of us, that Allah has given us to be the fuel, to be the power for us to develop our souls. The second one addresses experiential knowledge of the self. And the passage asserts that experiential knowledge of oneself goes beyond surface level self-awareness. It involves recognizing patterns within oneself, both positive and negative, which is crucial to developing experiential knowledge and awareness of Allah Azza. The third beautiful principle in this lesson is about self-knowledge and spiritual practices. The text highlights that self-knowledge is crucial in spiritual practice, as it serves as a mirror for gaining insight into the divine. It implies that understanding oneself is a means of gaining awareness and insight into Allah Azza. And then Imam Ghazali talks about two aspects of self-knowledge. The passage presents two aspects of self-knowledge, one that is more obscure and may be difficult for some intellects to comprehend, and the other that everyone can understand. The latter involves recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes and characteristics within one's own essence. The fifth point in this beautiful passage is about recognizing the Creator's attributes. By introspecting and observing the intricacies of one's own body, attributes, and needs, the passage suggests that one can recognize and identify the characteristics of the Creator Allah Azza. It emphasizes the perfection and wisdom inherent in the design and functionality of the human body, considering its complexity and purpose. The sixth point in the lesson today is understanding the attributes of God through self-knowledge. The passage proposes that through understanding one's own existence, characteristics, and needs, a person can perceive the attributes of Allah Azza. By seeing the interconnectedness of all aspects of their being, individuals can gain insight into the Creator's knowledge, power, and mercy. Number 7 talked about the divine attributes in creation. The text explains that the perfect design and organization of human body parts, needs, and tools indicate the divine attributes of knowledge, mercy, and care. If we look at how Allah cares for us, how then do we care for ourselves? Or do we beat ourselves up and talk horribly about ourselves and reveal the evil in our souls, or to reveal the magnificence of Allah Azza divine God infusion inside of us? These aspects of creation demonstrate the Creator's benevolence and concern for every single living being, humanity, and animals, and living trees and being. The 8th point in this passage is about the kindness and mercy of Allah. The passage asserts that through self-knowledge, one can observe the compassion and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which are manifested in the intricacies and blessings of existence. This understanding leads to a deeper connection with the divine. And then last but not least, the passage points out self-knowledge as a mirror. Ultimately, the passage concludes that self-knowledge serves as a mirror that reflects and reveals spiritual knowledge about God. That's why I pray that one day we will have a Sunday school class that will be teaching children this at their very earliest of ages. And I ask the new parents, and you're new if your baby hasn't been born yet and you have a baby in the womb, you are a parent, you are responsible, you would be paying zakat on that fetus. I ask you to remind me of my promise if Allah is giving me health and well-being, and if Allah hasn't, then I ask you to study these lessons and teach it to your children so that this is the first thing that they learn, not what the world wants them to know, not what their ego wants them to know, not what the public school system wants them to know. These passages that we looked at today underscore the importance of self-knowledge as a means of understanding and connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can we not connect with Allah when we look at the ni'am that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, the favor, the many things that we call miracles? We know that miracles were reserved for the prophets. May Allah be pleased with all of them. But these things that Allah have given us, we cannot even fully explain. These passages encourages individuals to explore their own being, their attributes, and needs to recognize the presence and characteristics of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their existence. This perspective suggests that self-awareness can be a profound spiritual journey leading to a deeper understanding not only of oneself, but of the nature of the divine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah azza wa jal, our owner and our creator. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Transcended are you, O Allah, and praise be to you as you praise yourself. I bear witness that there is no deity save you. I seek your forgiveness and I repent.